Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Karen Pank. I'm the Executive Director of CPOC, and I'm thrilled to be here today with our esteemed panel. We have quite a afternoon in store for all of you. Hopefully you know what you're tuning into, but today is the informational webinar, which is behind the California Probation Badge. What makes the modern probation profession essential and unique, which basically anybody who's tuning into this probably already knows the answer to that, but I think we'll have some really interesting insights to add to some of that with our panel here today. So for those of you who are the first time maybe joining us, you'll just to let you know how our process rolls, we have several chiefs on the line who have agreed to answer some questions that we thought would be good to dive into. But we also want to encourage those of you who are following along to send some questions in as the conversation progresses. And if you have some things that you would like the panel to tackle, we will try to get to as many of those questions as we can. Again, we will be recording this, so there'll be another opportunity if you miss something to catch it later. And if you have the opportunity to hear more about this topic, which we are about to launch a podcast episode on this topic, so you can hear a little bit more details on that as well. But we do have a new podcast that you can get access to at our website, cpoc.org. And so I would definitely encourage you to do that as well. So with the kind of announcement part of our afternoon kind of behind us now, let's jump into the really important part, which is hearing from the chiefs. And we'll go ahead and go to a question for each one, maybe get to know the chief a little bit when we ask the question. And so it'll take a little bit of time to get around to everybody. So, you know, for those of you who aren't first on the list, you'll be patient with us. We'll get to you. Chief Reyes, you are first on my list. And you should be ready for this because you are actually one of our guests on our podcast coming up on this topic. And so we had an opportunity to talk a little bit about this very issue yesterday. So I'm looking forward to you being able to share some of that information with those who are listening. You are the chief of San Luis Obispo County, for those who don't know, and you have been in probation for 23 years and 8 months. And who's counting, right? That's right. That's pretty impressive. You've been a chief for a year and 10 months, which I think actually almost gets you to the place where you can say you've been a chief for 2 years, right? Are we going to let him say he's been a chief for 2 years, guys? It seems like you've made that mark there. And we had asked all of you, which I thought was an interesting question for me to find out, is if you weren't the chief, you know, what was either your favorite assignment that you've had before in the department, or what would you want to do again if you weren't doing this particular job, which we know is your favorite of all the probation jobs. So Chief Reyes, what was your answer?
Yeah, thank you, Karen, and hello, everyone. My answer to that question was I would be the training manager, training coordinator, because I had an opportunity to do that as a supervisor, and I enjoyed all aspects of that because I got to work with all the probation officers and our custody officers on trying to develop them and bring new ideas and new things to the department. So I really enjoyed that. So if I wasn't chief, hopefully somebody out there would consider me to be a department training coordinator. So
there you go. Well, I get that. Getting to work with everybody in probation is really rewarding. I find that to be the case with my role as well. So the question we have for you that I'd love to have you share a little bit of your thoughts on right out of the gate is, you know, you've really talked a lot to us in the past kind of about the importance of kind of the role of probation plays in the modern setting, and the probation officer and the skill sets that are needed. So you kind of have inspired, frankly, this topic today, as well as the podcast topic. So what do you think is the most important thing for people listening today to kind of just take away from the conversation that we're trying to set up, which maybe is a good question for it to end, but I'd like to give people a little bit of insight as to why we even came up with this topic.
Sure. I mean, I think I came up with this topic because I think, and like a lot of us, we struggle ourselves to try to really figure out what we are or who we are. It's hard to put that in one or two words. And then when you think about talking about your job, talking about what you've done to the public, it's even more challenging because even in 2022, we still get confused with parole, which, that doesn't make much sense when you're in the profession. But so I do think there's still a lot of vagueness, or at least a lack of clarity about what probation is, what probation officers do, and what we do to contribute to the safety, to community safety, as well as just the opportunities that we provide to the people that walk through our doors. And so I think that it's important at least to have this conversation about that. But beyond that, I think it's really important that the public especially, and even decision makers, understand that we exist in most of the criminal justice system spaces in 2022. And that came very apparent to me looking back at my career. When I started, you either went to courts and investigations and you were into supervision. It was maybe 1 year after I started that drug courts really took hold in California. And ever since then, we have just expanded our footprint in the criminal justice system and in the juvenile justice system. We now, as I said to somebody, the only thing we're not doing is walking the grounds of most state prisons, but we're almost, in every place else we're there. And so I really think as we look towards the future, it's just the importance that as a profession, we always remember we must remain relevant. We must remain critical to the system. And in the only way we are going to be successfully do that and be vital to the system is to continue to learn, grow, and be able to adapt to whatever the needs are that are asked of us.
It's really important, right? And I think that was really at the heart of what we wanted to talk about today, right? Is that those things sometimes get lost in the conversation as to why it's important today. There's so many different things that probation is being asked to do, that our staff is being asked to do. And how do we make sure that, it's often a disservice over time. I think many of us have talked about how historically, people thought, well, are you the social worker with some enforcement mechanisms, or a compassionate law enforcement? It's really, it's neither. You are your own individual profession with an important skill set that needs to be nurtured and and embraced and educated. People need to be educated about what it is that is. And so as the training manager, and loving being a training manager, I guess that's something we can think about being sure we incorporate into our training as well. So let's jump to our next chief, also a recent podcast guest, Chief Miracle from Kern County. You also got a chance to think a little bit about this topic in the long drive from Kern to Sacramento and from Sacramento back to Kern. So I'm sure much wisdom has kind of befallen you in that travel. So I hope you can share with us today. You have 25 years of experience for those who also are maybe new to getting to know you, and almost 8 years as probation chief, which that time just flew by. I mean, that just really flew by. So share with us what your favorite probation assignment has been in your career to start.
Mine was definitely when I was a supervisor. And because the reason is because it's kind of where you're right in the middle, where you're implementing change, but you're still close to the work that's actually being done. And I think that's where it's probably one of the most rewarding, because you get to see the change, you get to help people and kind of be hands-on at the same time, having a little bit of a larger scope of influence. And so as you move up, it's really important and it's enjoyable, but sometimes I do miss being a little bit closer to the actual work of probation.
And I think that we hear that a lot from chiefs. And actually just today, I know we just had another Supervisor Leadership Academy graduation, and that's just always brings back to mind how vital, that role is in kind of carrying forth what the vision of the chief is, as well as really making the difference to individual lives that obviously probation does on a daily basis. So makes sense to me as to why that might be a favorite of yours. One of the things that we've recently had asked the chiefs, again, you can tell that I get to just ask things that are of great interest to me. And one of the things that was of great interest to me is, if you could describe probation in 2 words, what would it be? Most people say 1 word, right? But I was generous. I gave you guys 2 words to describe it. And in part because Chief Miracle, you really had set my mind around a 2-word concept here that we've really adopted kind of broadly in a lot of topics here. But what were your 2 words? And will you expand a little bit about how you came about that?
Sure. If I only had 1 word, it would screw up my whole answer. So thank you for giving me 2. So my 2 words are accountability and opportunity. And I think those words really sum up what probation is all about. It captures our unique dual roles. We need to hold people accountable. That's part of our job, and that's important. And I don't think we should shy away from talking about that. We just need to define what accountability means. It doesn't mean we want to lock everybody up forever. But when someone's doing something wrong and the community's in danger, it's our responsibility to hold them accountable. And that's how we get instant public safety. But equally important is to provide opportunities and to break down barriers for the people we work with. Because if we do that, we can break the cycle of recidivism, and that's where we get long-term public safety. So accountability and opportunity together is what I think probation is all about. And like Chief Reyes was saying earlier, it is really hard to describe what we do, because we do so many things, and that list of what we do keeps growing all the time. But I think what we can describe is how we do it, and that's accountability and opportunity. No matter where you are in probation investigations, you're out in the field, you're in the facilities, you're constantly need to be having the balance of accountability and opportunity. And another reason I think accountability and opportunity is important, because you have to be an open-minded individual to entertain seemingly contradictory roles, right? Now, as in probation, we know they're not contradictory. We know they're just 2 sides of one coin. But when you think about other roles in the criminal justice system, they must always occupy one space or the other. And we're unique because we simultaneously occupy both. And that's why I think accountability and opportunity really best describes the modern probation officer.
Well done. I almost feel like I should stand up and clap. I like it. I appreciate it. And actually, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball in, because I didn't kind of suggest that we would ask all of you that question, but maybe as we go around the horn, I would really love to hear your thoughts, if you would share them, because, we did ask that question of all chiefs, and we got quite a listing of words that all kind of did, I think, sound similar in what you were just describing, and it really, the 2 words really do help provide the balance or the 2 sides of the coin, like you suggest. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And with that, I'll jump to Chief Tulock from San Francisco Adult. Oh, I saw her, like you got all surprised, like, oh, I'm next. Wait. So thanks for joining us. I really, again, appreciate your time for being here with us today. And I have you down for also 23 years in probation, which that's amazing. And you have 8 months in as chief, which I also think gives you almost close to a year. So we're going to go with you're almost a year chief. So that's, again, went very fast, actually. These last couple of months, I'm sure feel the same for you. I loved your story around your favorite assignment. Do you recall what you shared with me, and will you share it with our listeners here?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be.
Oh,
Sorry,
there you
I'm off mute.
A
So
sensitive microphone, that happens.
that's right. Like I haven't been practicing for the past 8 months, but so yes, I do recall, and I really had to think about how to respond to that question. It has been 23 years, and luckily, there were many different projects to think about. And I believe you're asking me about my favorite project, right? And so I'm a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school many, many years ago, and I had a really good time when I dropped out of high school. But at some point, you have to think about your future. And so I did, and luckily I got back into the swing of things, and here I am. So it's a storyline that I never really held on to because I just always moved forward until I came here, and I was already a supervisor, and I was given the opportunity to go into partnership with 5 Keys to start a school for our clients to help them get their GED, their high school diploma, and or to increase their literacy. And in building that, our first school, now we have 2 schools because we've been so successful at it. It's been 12 years now. Watching the modules and seeing it all come together, I was like, hey, that's really part of the way I got my high school diploma. So that experience really helped me to stay really engaged with those schools. It's still my favorite project. I continue to manage that project all the way up until 8 months ago when it just wasn't feasible anymore. And I handed it over to someone, and I was very clear that this is the project that's the most near and dear to me because I know what our schools offer could lead to me. And so I really appreciate that opportunity to have that, to really blend my personal experience with my career to truly help people change their lives. So that's my story.
I love the story, and it kind of points out something that I hadn't really thought about until I was just listening to you now. Like, I often wonder, why are probation officers so good at the compassionate part? Why are they so good at the connection to services? Like, why is it? Like, what's innate in them that drives them to take the time to actually be thinking about those things and oftentimes go above and beyond kind of what the workday entails in order to do that? It's because you see why it's so important, right? If those types of services, if those types of supports aren't there originally, that does lead one to potentially be on your caseload, right? You see kind of the end result. So, that's probably a human nature to want to try to go back and figure out ways to avoid that, knowing that, but for those that, you can't, and they're on your caseload and you have to hold them accountable, if that's what ends up happening, that's something that has to be done as well. But it's probably why you see it being so important. I mean, I'm just projecting at this point, obviously, but that does strike me as maybe one of the things that gives probation officers that extra drive to do those types of things. So I was hoping that you would specifically answer a question related to, because we sent you 2 questions. The first or the second one you kind of answered with your story. So I'll go to the first one. We've talked in the past this year, I think after we picked up on these statistics, but that California probation officers are about 51% women, 74% non-white. And another thing we've grappled with is, why is that, and what drives the diversity, which is so different in our profession than perhaps other professions, and seems to be something that a lot of folks talk about should be a goal of all professions. So what is it that you think kind of accounts for that?
So I think it's an interesting question because usually when people talk about women and what they bring, the first thing they always say is, because they're nurturers. And so, what I will not say is that we benefit our profession because we're nurturers. You know, nurturing is not a blanket characteristic for all women. There are, you know, men that are better nurturers than women and so on. You know, women are so incredibly powerful because, you know, we started the civil rights movement and voting rights and criminal justice reform movements. You know, it all, so much has started with us. So, you know, even as we saw this week in some of the primaries across the nation, we see when women register and vote, when women mobilize, we make change, we win elections. You know, that's not nurture, that's unapologetic, it's empowerment. And I mean, I'm not saying nurturing is not a strength, but it is limiting to always hear people qualify women that way. So when we talk about, you know, who women are and what we bring to probation, especially if they are from, especially if the woman's from like an immigrant community or diverse background, it is that empowerment and that fierceness and heart and ability to navigate that we bring to the field of probation and make it so much more vibrant and colorful and meaningful. I know for me, I am the only female chief that we have had in my department that is also a mother of really young children. So naturally, that impacts how I frame my work day and my commitments and how I drive my department. You know, so as a female chief, that's, you know, part of the richness that I bring to my department in this leadership role. But when we talk about the presence of women and not non-white officers, you know, I that is very layered and peppered with so many positive and not so positive reasons. But it mirrors the nation and trends as it relates to who's attending university and what fields such as probation are more prepared for women to move into the fold. So that's my response. Thanks.
Well, that is a lot there to Beck. I appreciate you sharing all of that, and it's it does also show. I mean, chiefs are people too, right? Which would probably be an important message to get out to those who are watching this. We are shaped by who we are. I say we. I'm not a chief, but you all are shaped by who you are and you know where you are in your life, and so that's a unique thing, you know, to bring to the to the table as well. So so yeah, I like fierce empowerment. That resonates with me. I like that. Your two words that you would use to describe the modern probation.
Oh, we're undervalued and opportunity.
Oh, I like that. And that's what we're trying to change here today, right? And in other aspects, we want to be sure, you know, education sometimes is a good way to get past the undervalue piece of it, right? And so, this is good to have these discussions. And to that end, I'll just do a plug to remind folks, if you do have a question about this, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A, and we'll try to pick it up when we get through a few more of these. So, Chief Hanson from Solano County. All right, you found the unmute button. I'm taking that as a signal that you are ready to engage in this discussion.
We are ready. We are ready.
Excellent. So I probably should know this by memory, and I don't, but you didn't send me ahead of time any of your answers, so this makes me nervous. I'll be real honest with our audience here. It makes me nervous. You're going totally unplugged and uncensored, or you know, I don't know what you're going to say. Don't take that as the, you know, the authority to say whatever. No, I'm just teasing you. No, I really introduce yourself. Tell us how many years you've been in probation and how long you've been a chief.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm privileged to be here. And as those of you that have done colors know, I mean, colors, I'm an orange. and with some blue. So you know that oranges never do anything in advance. We usually do our term papers the day of or the night before. So that's why Karen didn't get it. This is my 38th year in probation. I spent 3 years as a police officer. Other than that, I've been a probation officer, both on the state side, the federal side, and now the county side. So I know some of you are expecting me to go to dust in front of you after 38 years, but I still have a few good years left. So, and I'm in Solano County, and this has been probably my favorite thing I've done in my life.
That's great. That is, what are your 2 words that you would use to describe?
Powerful and compassionate.
Great words. I'm like kind of just letting that hang out there for a moment. That is impactful. So tell us a little bit about the unique skill sets, because I mean, I do think that, you know, in our work, we touch a lot of other stakeholders, you know, policy issues, et cetera. We see a lot of different things. I mean, you know, I feel qualified to say probation is unique and plays a unique role. I'm sure you all feel quite the same, but what unique skill sets do you think probation officers in today's world, you really need to have to do this work and to do it well?
But, you know, I think that's a great question. And so if I was going to Ruth Chris's, if I was looking for a probation officer on the menu, it would be meatloaf, right? It wouldn't be the T-bone because that's like the glamorous, but the meatloaf is the staple, right? It holds everything together. It's everybody's comfort food. And so in that meatloaf, I would say, you know, my top 2 ingredients would be what we're doing now. The ability to communicate, the ability to talk to each other, the ability to look somebody in the eye and have honest conversations. The other part would be empathy, right? Empathetic with people. And then, you know, the onions and all the other stuff, because every restaurant you throw some different crap in there to get the meatloaf, because if every meatloaf was the same, we'd all be at our grandmother's house eating it, right? So everybody's got a little bit different. So, you know, you got to sprinkle the accountability in there. You got to be able to have those tough conversations. You have to be able to have the accountability, have the ability to have a conversation with somebody. The next day, the ability to search their house. And the next day, the ability to be at their house and to have another conversation where you don't have to be fearful of your life because you treated them with dignity and respect, and they know that you have their best interest in heart. And that is really, really tough to do. I kind of look at it like farm to table, that we are like farmers sometimes. We go around and plant seeds and say we're in California. So we plant a crap load of seeds. But with our drought, not all the seeds spring into crops. But when we see one of those seeds spring up and raise up to the sunshine and be a beautiful plant, and that's what we get gems every once in a while. We have the ability to change lives. And there's no other profession, I think, that can be as scattered as we are with doing a multitude of things, but have such phenomenal results that at the end of the day, there can be no better public protection than somebody who has changed their life, is law-abiding, paying taxes, raising their family, and doing the right thing. And sometimes, but for their probation officer, that would never happen.
Those are the best stories, right? And we hear a lot of them. And I mean, it really kind of fills the soul. I do wonder if did you get lunch today, Chief Hanson? Because all of your analogies were kind of food driven. And so I'm a little, but they were so spot on in a very unique way.
You heard my stomach, didn't you? It was a little proud. So.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that. That was a very indicative of what we hear a lot around our table in talking with each other about what's happening in our individual counties and the work. And when it all comes back to it, it's that, you know, it's really what you're talking about. So So that's not only did it make me hungry, it made me hungry for wanting to know more. But we're going to have to move on to the next question, so you can prepare some more analogies when I come back around.
Oh.
So Chief Yarber, you're up next. Chief Yarber from Sacramento, thank you for joining us. 17 years in probation, a year as chief. Again, that also seems, both of those two things seem like time has flown by. Tell us your favorite probation assignment in your career.
Oh, so first, thank you. And thank you for not putting me after Chief Tulock. I'm always impressed by her. I'm glad Chief Hanson had to follow her. And I'm also reminded that Sacramento is the farm to fork capital. So appreciate Chief Hanson's sort of softball, if you will. Unfortunately, in my career, I've done so many different things. Time spent working for the state of California with the Board of Corrections, then Correction Standards Authority. Certainly, starting my career in Stanislaus County and having had many opportunities to do, a variety of things. But the thing that I wished I had had an opportunity to do, so I'll answer it slightly in a different way. The assignment I wished I had had is something that I love about a particular role in our department, and that is the supervisor that's assigned to our communications unit. And I think that would be just an incredible assignment because, you're tasked with such a variety of duties. You're often speaking for the chief, speaking for the department, both internally to staff, but also externally to stakeholders. By no means am I a social media, expert, but you're handling sort of the immediate connectivity through those different avenues. But it's really about, the message and really the communication of the identity of what probation does that I think is, which is what I think would make it such an enriching experience or assignment, because you get to talk to people that, to Chief Reyes' point, really have no clue about what probation does. You get to talk about the role that we play in the system, the value that we provide. You get to also recruit, people who maybe are interested in doing something as it relates to criminal justice or juvenile justice, and then sort of invite them to be, more a part of that solution. I always message when I'm doing recruiting myself that there's no better way to give back to your community than to become a probation officer. And so I think the communications assignment is one that I wished I had had opportunity for.
That is something that you don't hear as often, but is really ties to the question that I actually wanted to get a little deeper in with you, which is, why is probation, we often say, the connector in the justice system, and what do you think it would look like maybe if there wasn't that connection, i.e. if there wasn't probation in the system?
Yeah, no, great question. And, start with the last half, and if there ever was a time to toot the probation horn, it's now. And I think without us in the system, certainly things would be much more chaotic, uneven, unbalanced. I think you just see the politics become much more inflamed. We are often the voice of reason in the system. We provide balance to, what is often an adversarial exchange as it relates to court specifically. The probation officer historically looked to as sort of that reasonable man or woman. And I think, we continue to provide that voice. We're the connector for, a variety of reasons, not the least of which, it's not just a snazzy newsletter name, but we're often the entity that's connecting both the system, if you will, of the courts and the county to, support and services, whether it be treatment or housing or education, or connectivity with victims, let's say, and supporting, their experience. So probation is often the hub, if you will, that ensures that all of those things are not lost through what can be often a chaotic process. In that, there's just tremendous value placed on the role that we play when we think about conversations involving any of those stakeholders, they're often looking to us as the problem solvers. When they have the idea, it's often us that's implementing it. When the issue du jour being homelessness, as I mentioned, it's often us that's talked of as being the problem solver with connecting our clientele to opportunities to become housed. And so we've certainly been the connector and the hub, as I say always. I think early in my career that was the word, if you will, and now being looked to as the connector, I think, is really just a reminder that we play such a pivotal role in the system.
Well, and it's really kind of begs the question, which kind of touches on something that kind of came through in the Q&A. Well, why couldn't somebody else do it that's already currently in, the system, right? I mean, is it like an unneeded layer? Why is it needed? Why is it unique? I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think when you again, you look at the system, and there are oftentimes competing interests, if you will, and our interest is about what is right. And so, to a nod really to Chief Miracle, I think it's that balance of accountability and opportunity that we present and bring to the equation. And often it's with everyone's best interest essentially in mind. So many of our staff, I know all of you on this webinar, we don't do it for the fame, we don't do it for the recognition, we do it because we all have a genuine interest in seeing our communities flourish, and we share that community certainly with all of our clientele. So the reasons are really, I think, in support of the health that we all want to support.
Well, and that makes a lot of sense to me, right? I mean, when you think about the balance, going back to, the two sides of the coin, as Chief Miracle mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, or the meatloaf, if you're kind of thinking that you're a little hungry and want to get a little spicier. But the reality is, the balance is about making sure things don't get out of balance, right? So if, for example, there's no probation, and let's say, some of those functions fall to a different entity, like maybe say a sheriff's department or something along those lines, that their mission is really more on the enforcement, angle. So even though a lot of times we work together, right, with those entities, without having a place besides just the incarceration or just the enforcement to really look at either how do you do in lieu of, or how do you do reentry after the incarceration setting, you really need to have that. How do you make sure that, that a county system, which, obviously probation is fair and balanced as it relates to the court system, whose mission is very related to the fairness of the process, right? But you can go too far if you don't have kind of the anchor in, but what's realistic? What system can actually set up to support those court options? And so I know when we're talking at the policy level, at least at the state, a lot of those conversations sometimes do have to kind of be peeled back a little bit to see, how you do that. Or, the other way, could social work or, even community perhaps do some of the work that we have all just now talked about related to the support, maybe not exclusively, right? But it probably needs to be both, because again, looking for that balance in the system, it seems like it would be out of balance without that connection.
No, absolutely. And, because we perform so many functions, have such a journey level at the very least, if not an expertise level of knowledge in regards to all of those systems, whether it be, how the court functions, the various codes that are at play. You think about penal code, certainly welfare institutions, government code, health code, ed code, our staff being skilled at, navigating mental health diagnoses, understanding, brain development, human development, and certainly the shifting politics of the day. We are uniquely situated to be able to address those needs. Without us, essentially you leave the system to be skewed one way or the other, and you leave it to folks who, again, as you mentioned, have different missions and different leanings. The best part, I think, about probation is that we bring all of that in one package. So in terms of efficiency, you're not just relying on one entity to do accountability. You're not just relying on another entity to do, service connectivity. You're really relying on probation, who can address all of those behaviors in the emergent, immediate moment of, witnessing certain behaviors. So that's really the value that we add.
Appreciate you kind of going off script for me for a moment and just kind of getting into taking one of the questions from the audience. So as the questions kind of roll in, I want to get in our last but not least guest, Chief Even-Krause from Contra Costa. Thank you for joining us again. I know we've had you on before, and you always share such great wisdom with us. And so looking forward to diving into this conversation with you as well. You have 13 years in probation, 10 in state corrections. So we can talk a little bit about the differences. You have a different vantage point on that. And almost 2.5 years as chief. So that's, you're scratching your head. How did that happen? You said.
I have no idea how that happened. It feels like I blinked, right?
And you refused to answer my question, which was, what else would you, or what's your other assignment that you love?
I love what I do. I love being a chief. More importantly, though, I think I love being the chief in Contra Costa County because I really inherited an amazing team that was just so innovative and had so much energy and enthusiasm. And I know I probably brought even a higher level of energy and enthusiasm when I got there, but they've been so receptive to all of my ideas. And, I think they cringe a little when I come back from CPOC quarterlies that, oh gosh, what's she going to bring back now? But yeah, I love what I do. I think we're making some really great strides in Contra Costa County, and, just so excited about what our future is going to look like for our community.
I took note. Apparently your staff does not like it when you go to a CPOC meeting. So I will try not to send you home with any other workload for your.
It's usually not work, Karen. It's usually that I hear other ideas that are happening in other counties, and I'm like, hey, we should do that also.
Well, that is the beauty, I think, sometimes of you all talking to each other, is that there's a lot of innovative ideas out there, some of which have already been shared on this call. So let's jump into your question. We often hear, about recruitment and recruitment issues, and who are we looking for? Here we are talking about the modern probation officer. What are those skill sets? So, I hear many of you talk about, it almost doesn't, it's not a specific college background that you're looking for necessarily. It's you take all sorts of different backgrounds, not just criminal justice degrees per se. So why is that? And why does that work so well with probation?
So I feel like I've told my story maybe on one of these webinars, or maybe like an SLA or an MLA graduation, but I wasn't initially a criminal justice major. I ended up with a criminal justice and soc major, but initially I was a journalism major. And it was really, through a series of amazing professors and mentors and so forth that I sort of stumbled into community corrections, and then corrections, and then the universe brought me back to where I started way back when, to probation. And I think that really when you're looking at a 4-year degree, you're looking for the critical thinking skills more than anything that 4-year degree brings, and the ability to write well, the ability to analyze concepts, the ability to be really Socratic when you're engaging in conversations and dialogues, which I think really when you're talking about motivational interviewing, it's drawn from a Socratic learning style, right? It's questioning and engaging and rolling with resistance. And so I really believe that particularly as the field of probation evolves, and as we both refine and continue to expand the scope and nature of our individual department missions, I think it's going to be really critical that we are open to exploring other academic and even professional backgrounds, right? So as we increase our partnerships and contracting efforts with our nonprofit partners, we know we're going to need analytical capacity. We know we're going to need fiscal infrastructure to support that contracting, because, you know, it sounds good to say we're putting the dollars out, but you also have to manage those dollars and manage the outcomes and gather the data and so forth. But I think also, you know, technology, project management. So those are some things when I go speak to college classes, or when I engage with administrators of, say, justice programs at colleges, I say, yeah, I'd love to send my staff to talk to your classes, but I'd also love to send my staff to talk to people in the sociology department or the psychology department or the business department or computer sciences, because as we're all bringing on case management systems at varying levels, you know, having people on staff that can internally develop and customize those programs for us is also really important. So really being able to bring in those people with the vast skill sets. You know, there was this really interesting study published in 2005, which I know seems like it's kind of old, and I'm probably dating myself because this was published like in the Journal of Prisons or something way back when. But I'm confident the results are still relevant. And they did this really interesting study looking at intensive supervision practices in community corrections. And they put the people, the practitioners into three general categories, right? So there was the law enforcement, and those are people whose training and background tended to be more paramilitaristic. And then they put people into a social work background. And so those are people whose classic training was really geared more towards social work. And then there was the balanced category, right? And it was really interesting because when you look then at technical violations for the clients on their caseloads, clearly those indicated in the law enforcement kind of bucket were much higher. So your technical violations were the percentage point was statistically significant for those with the law enforcement background. By comparison, the social work background, huge disparity, right? There just were no technical violations for the people who had the social work background. The balance was as you would expect. It was pretty balanced, right? So they were going to hold their clients accountable when necessary. They were also going to lean into that service provision when necessary. But the really interesting data point came out when they looked at revocations for new convictions. And on that one, social work and law enforcement were both relatively high, which indicated to the researchers that, so if they're actually out there committing new law violations, maybe it doesn't matter what their supervising officer's background was. Where it was lower, though, was on that balanced, which said to the researchers, oh, that's because they're doing things while they're on their caseload that are really making a difference with how they are, you know, going out into the community and engaging as what we're hoping to be law-abiding citizens. So I thought that was really interesting. And I really think it speaks to why it is so important that we are recruiting people with very balanced and diverse backgrounds. And I feel like from everything my esteemed colleagues have said today, balance seems to be the word of the day. But I really think that study, as old as it is, shows why it is so important to recruit people with really diverse backgrounds, both academically and from a professional standpoint.
That's so, you know, I won't remember the study nor the date of the study because I can't recall facts as well as you just did. So I appreciate that. And I'd love you to send me that study just because I think it really does underscore kind of a very relevant topic, which is also, I think, kind of woven into some of the questions that have come across so far as well. But you know, the other study that I had read really early on in my career in working with probation that stuck out to me to this day is that one of the things that made the biggest difference in recidivism was the quality of the relationship that the client had with their officer. And I thought, that's what it is. That's not, I mean, there's a lot of innovative, evidence-based, you know, kind of programs that we hear about. There's a lot of really new things that all of you try, or, you know, kind of the issue du jour, you know, or reform du jour that comes through at times. And, you know, there's arguments about, does it work? Is it better? that's really not where the rubber meets the road. It's the meatloaf. It's the meatloaf, you know, and so it just really feels to me like the things that we're talking about here is really about all of the people who are listening to hopefully this webinar. It's the work that they do and the relationships that they have that really are going to make the difference. So no matter what you're called or whatever your assignment is, it's just so critically important, it seems to me, to the thing that everybody talks about, which is the public safety, which is the you know, kind of vibrant and thriving communities, you know, and how do you get to that? So I actually swore to myself I wouldn't get on my soapbox today, but I did. So I apologize, but you brought it out of me, Chief Even-Krause. So thank you very much for sharing that. So a couple of questions that I want to throw out to the group as a whole is, you know, one, with so many of the different skill sets and so many things being asked of probation, you know, are we a jack of all trades and not necessarily an expert in one or the other, or how do you balance that, you know, and do you have any thoughts about that? Because it does become a lot for one person potentially to do and keep in mind and then become an expert on. So how do you guys balance that?
I'll jump in. It's a great question. You know, I remember it was not long ago when I was sworn in. So, you know, selected as chief, I think in October, and sworn in though a couple months later in December. And there were some really nice comments from our board of supervisors and some of my colleagues, other department heads. And I think it was our child welfare director, and just said, you know, I love so much of, you know, what the chief represents. You know, probation, you guys are great. You are like social workers who are also law enforcement. And, you know, I very carefully, adeptly, but directly reminded folks like, hey, we wear one hat, and that one hat is probation. And because of that, we know something about what all the rest of you do. And that is really who we are. You know, I heard Chief Reyes comment earlier, you know, a lot of folks don't know what we do. And, you know, we've all had that experience where we've been on the airplane, or, you know, you're in the grocery store and you got this downtime and, oh, well, you know, what do you do? And, you know, depending on who it is, you may or may not give them the exact answer. But, you know, sometimes I'll say I'm a probation officer. Don't really say that I'm the chief always. And it'll be, you know, the answers are, well, oh, that must be so tough dealing with that population. Or, is that the same thing as parole? Or, you know, if you're lucky, you know, do you work at juvenile hall? Like, you know, I'll take that one almost. But it's just this reminder that, you know, people really don't understand that, you know, we wear one hat, but are really just, you know, highly skilled, multidisciplinary entity.
I like that. I can never get out the word multidisciplinary entity, which is so many of you know, but you nailed it. You nailed it, and that was good. And it is that multidisciplinary approach that actually leads to public safety, and that's the thing that I think we're seeing a lot of, you know, in our individual departments, and maybe isn't quite understood, you know, across the board. But yeah, it does seem like the proof has been in the pudding. So Chief Reyes, you came off the mic, so you've got something to add.
Yeah, I did, because I just think it's really important, because I have decided personally that I'm going to reject this paradigm that we're somewhat law enforcement and we're somewhat social workers, because I really think it diminishes what we are and what we do in the criminal justice system and in the juvenile justice system. You know, I don't know what the magic word is of what we are, but what I do know is I would akin to, you go to your general doctor, you have a whole lot of problems. He or she may not know how to kind of address it, so they send you to a specialist, right? And to some degrees, we are specialists in trying to determine how are we going to work with this human being that we have to immediately establish rapport, get a sense of what their level of motivation and readiness is to want to change, while at the same time trying to diagnose, is this somebody that I could safely go contact? Who do they live with? And if something bad happens, what is going to be my tactical response to addressing a safety issue? And then when I'm done with that, then how do I go back and then reestablish that rapport and we start working on what we have to work on together? To me, and I just gave a very brief overview about what we do. I could have added a bunch of different things. When you think about, we have to know about adolescent development. We have to know about how trauma affects people. And, Chief Yarber talked about mental illness, and we go, on and on. I mean, heck, the attorneys call us and want us to try to define what the law means to them because they can't figure it out. So we really are specialists. And I just think we need to throw out the old paradigm, because I really do think it diminishes what we actually do and contribute to the criminal justice system, like I said. So I would just encourage everybody just to reject that notion, and we can move forward with that.
I'd just like to say one
Yeah.
thing is that we are good. And that sometimes is our downfall, because they will call on probation because they know we will do it. They know if we do it, we will do it right, and we will do it well. And that's why we are so expansive. I just got a request from a judge, said, hey, could you please help us in mental health diversion court? I know you don't have a dog in that fight, but you're the ones that get stuff done. And I can't get anybody else. Could you help us? And that sums up probation, because we are good. And because we have that one hat, we can do a lot of stuff. And I think that goes to the credit of our phenomenal staff. But I mean, if we were a circus act, we'd be jugglers, but we'd be also on a ball juggling with a dog jumping over our head. And we would do it darn good.
Amen. Chief Tulock.
Yes, we are good. And but where we don't do a good job is we do not market ourselves well. We don't do enough to put ourselves out in front of all of the conversation about criminal justice reform and rethinking the justice system. We collectively don't do enough to make sure that when people are thinking about how to restructure and how to rethink, they should be thinking about probation, because we are that difference. We are the solution. We offer the alternatives. We are palatable enough for both sides of this argument of what to do about the crime in our communities and the challenges that people are facing. We offer everything, and we are that balance. We do bring that balance. What I don't think we do enough is really help, or I'll speak for myself, and it's something that I'm conscious of and something I'm working on as I think about strategizing where I want to take my organization, is our success really does rest with the line. It rests with our officers. Like, we're able to say that we're so great because of how they deliver these services and the professional alliances that they build. And investing in them and helping them to help us get the word out and really demonstrate our value is what's going to sustain our profession over the next decade and more, because we know that people are looking at us. We know that people want to dismantle us and they want to do all these different things with what we do. And if we're not organized, and if we're not at every level able to articulate why why no one could do what we do the way we do it, then it will be collectively our demise. I think we really need to walk with pride with what we do and be ready to articulate to everyone our value.
I couldn't agree more, although all of a sudden I feel like a very heavy, heavy on the shoulders here. It's because what you speak of, Chief Tulock, I think is absolutely vital, because it is what the conversation, and a couple of questions that have come in have kind of talked a little bit about that. Like, what is the trajectory of where the politics are going to take us, right? And depending on where you live, it might even be a little bit different, right? So some people at times feel like it's safer, and some of your staff may feel as it's safer to be in the more closely aligned with the more law enforcement kind of mantra. But in some places, it's actually quite different, you know, to your point, Chief Tulock. And I think that it goes back to what you were just saying, Chief Reyes. It's really neither. It is a specialty, and you know, it's not about picking for those sides, and you can, and the system can even move closer to one side or the other if that is the will of the people. But it doesn't eliminate the need to ensure that this specialist is still there and doing the types of things that we've already, you know, been asked to do, committed to do, and will continue to be asked to do, because I couldn't agree with you more, Chief Hanson. It happens all the time, right? And, you know, we look at stuff that has nothing to do with us, and we start to say, wait a minute, you know what's going to happen when this doesn't work in implementation. People are going to pick up the phone and call the chief and ask for you guys to step in.
Yeah, hey, Karen, and I think it's important that we not forget just the fantastic work that our staff at our juvenile halls and camps do every day.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of change that they've gone through and the expectations now that they have and what they do, you know, I want to make sure in this discussion we not forget them as well, because we are asking a lot of them, and it demands a skill set, you know, very similar to what a probation officer needs in order to do their job effectively. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. Thank you.
No, thank you for adding that. I'm sure that is much appreciated. And, you know, I kind of think of it when we're talking about it, it's the probation globally, and that's certainly a big part of what we do. So I'm hopeful that others on the call saw or see it the same way. Couple of other questions that have come in, and I think just trying to package it a little bit and maybe try to take care of a lot of what's underlying some of them. And you know, I think it does give you a chance to talk a little bit more about what's already been said and underscore it, because a lot of the questions coming in are a little bit more along the lines of social work or the law enforcement. So like, for example, right now, law enforcement in many cases have maybe been viewed in a negative light in the past few years. What do you think probation, you know, can or should be doing about that to remove the stigma? Anybody want to take that?
I would love to jump in on this one. So I think community engagement is critical. And I think we need to lean into those less than common spaces right now. We were fortunate enough to just purchase 3 rec vans, if you will, with some of our pretrial one-time dollars. And I know Marin has been out to see them, and we're happy to bring them down to CPOC when it's in Santa Cruz to let the other chiefs tour them. But one of the functions, in addition to using them for pretrial purposes, is we're using them for some community engagement efforts. And we were able to take one of the vans to a community day event in Antioch, which is a city in Contra Costa County that we've seen the greatest increase in crime, both juvenile and adult, and the greatest increase in intakes to our juvenile halls and so forth. And it's not a community that I think would have previously welcomed probation necessarily, but we've got some good partners, both within their city council as well as with their new police chief. And so we went to one of their community days. We took their van, and some of our staff volunteered. Well, I mean, obviously it was on overtime for the most part, but staff that volunteered to be a part of this went and spent a Saturday, and we were like the hit of the event. So while initially people were kind of like, why is probation here? You know, then eventually we had some recruiting materials because we thought, why not? We had some stuff for the kiddos, right? And then by the end of the day, like, our table and our van was a hit. And so we're just softening, right? Even though our staff were there, the ones who were uniform were there in uniform, we were softening what probation is in the community. And so how can we be in more spaces like that? We now have a partnership with the food bank locally. So we have, I call them the satellite food pantries, but each of our satellite offices has a little food pantry at it now. So every client that comes for an office visit, or if they just need food, right, knows that they can stop by their probation office. For the first time ever, we hosted a Toys for Tots drop-off site in West County. West County didn't have a Toys for Tots drop-off site. And so we had a staff member who knew that through some other avenue or connection that he networked with, and said, hey, you know, would Chief mind if we had a drop-off site here? Absolutely not. And we collected more than 7.5 huge Toys for Tots boxes. And so it's things like that that change how we partner and what we're seen as in the community, I think. We do a lot of work with homeless outreach, particularly those that are like within the perimeter of some of our office spaces. And so again, I think just breaking down those barriers in the community of who we are, letting them see that we are not all about enforcement and accountability, but that compassion is really at the heart of why we do what we do, and that we really are invested and engaged in our communities, kind of beyond that community supervision lens.
I appreciate you sharing that. There are a couple of questions kind of also underscored, not just what we just asked, but also just this. It kind of feels like, staff is a little bit concerned about the pendulum swing that we've talked a lot about at our tables, and that's understandable, right? There's been a lot of change in the last several years, decade plus, around criminal justice, juvenile justice in general, and so it could leave staff kind of wondering, are we here to stay? I mean, we are, a law enforcement entity, and there's negative things out there. And so I think, I'm playing an armchair psychologist, very dangerous to do, but it seems like in just some of the questions received, that does make sense why somebody might feel like, is there some danger? What can we do? What I hear you all saying, which is also very consistent with what my communications folks would tell me, it's message discipline. You are good. You are specialists. You are needed. You are unique. The system requires do what you do the way in which we do it. And we just have to stay on that drumbeat and share it more and more so that people get more comfortable with it. I know I fall prey to it sometimes too. You want to chase what is like the new issue du jour, which way are the politics going? And it does impact us. I mean, I'm not here to say that it doesn't, but staying where you are and your defined lane in probation, again, is so unique. It's just keep doing it well. It seems like some of the other things will probably resolve itself as, others try to deal with what area or extreme, side should things kind of land on broadly. But is that, well, hopefully no one's going to tell me I was wrong on this, but maybe you would want to politely refine anything I just said. Please do.
I'll jump in, Karen. And we talked about this on the podcast yesterday about, actually what you just said, the pendulum swinging back and forth, and probation's job and our communication needs to be, we're the one who stops the pendulum and holds it right in the middle. Because when we swing back and forth, there's always unintended consequences. And the most productive way is always moderation. It's always the middle way. And when we go out and people are concerned, are we too law enforcement? Are we not enough law enforcement? I don't care what people, what they want. We just need to be who we are. And then, as was said, we just need to make sure we're telling that story. And I think all of us are getting much better at it than we were. When we started, we tried to keep our head down. That's what it seemed like. And I started in 1997, and it was just like, I hope nothing bad happens today. And you're just kind of, no one calls. And now we're out, we're doing it. And we're not where we need to be yet, but we're certainly getting there. And like I said, I think we're on the right path. I think balance is the right thing. We just got to communicate that to everybody.
Come on, Chief Hanson, you want to say something. I can tell you're trying to decide.
So I was just going to say that we have experienced so much metamorphosis over our time. When I started as a 21-year-old in Florida, my ID said Florida Department of Offender Rehabilitation. And 6 months later, they took that back and said, now you're Florida Department of Corrections. We don't care about rehabilitation. So we went from the medical model, right? Then we went to rehabilitation. Then we went to law enforcement. And now we're back to doing what probation officers do, what John Augustus did, right? Holding people accountable, making sure they get the services they need. But we do it phenomenally well. And this is like the first time in my career that we are doing what probation is meant to do. We change lives. And that is a cool thing. And sometimes changing life may be putting somebody in custody, right? For public protection, we got to get you off the street. But the beauty of probation is whether it's 6 months or 5 years later, when that person pops in your office again, you're like, all right, let's get to this. Let's start again. And that's what we have the ability to be. We're flexible, we're smart, we care, but this is what probation is about. And I think sometimes we lose that because, as my esteemed colleagues say, we're too much either law enforcement or social work. We're not that one hat that does it right. And I think we're fine tuning that balance, but we're doing really well with it.
I would agree. I think you guys are doing phenomenal with it. All right, so I think we took care of a couple of the questions from the audience. Again, as we're getting closer to the 3 o'clock, if you have anything else to add, please feel free to do so. So we will move to a couple of other questions, and I'd love to throw this out to everybody. So, take your turns answering as you see fit. But what are the greatest challenges for probation, for the probation officer on the horizon, right? Like, what types of things are you thinking about as chief? Where is some of the focus needed right now because of some of these emerging issues, which again, still keeps us within that lane that we've just been talking about, but what do you see in the future?
Well, I can start because it really does kind of touch on the other question that I answered. And I think that recruitment and retention particularly are going to be really challenging for our field. And then, kind of the ripple effect is also for our officers, because it will create staffing challenges, which create workload challenges. But, I feel like the fact that we have to continue to defend who we are in the court of advocate opinion isn't necessarily helping our recruitment and retention efforts either. So that also sort of goes back to our messaging and so forth. But these recruitment efforts aren't just isolated to California. On a national level, we're hearing that there are significant recruitment challenges also in probation and corrections and so forth. So it's just that people aren't applying. And so that's really critical when you start looking at how do you recruit, what is important to the coming generations of the workforce, because that's also going to then impact how we train those staff once we do get them on board, what sort of incentives we can put in place to keep them engaged and retain them. So I think that's going to be a real challenge, again, not just for probation in California, but more broadly. How do we get our employees on board, and then how do we motivate them and inspire them to continue to want to be a part of this profession?
We have been hearing a lot about the recruitment and the retention, and that obviously impacts the people who are currently doing this, very difficult job now, right? So it's got to be of great interest for those listening in. So knowing that we're talking a lot about that, knowing that it's a national trend as well, it says something that we probably need to be paying attention to and help try to address that. Other challenges besides the recruitment?
Well, Karen, I'll kind of add to that. I mean, I do think the other challenge we have, and I think it kind of does play in part what Chief Even-Krause has said, is, we're going to have to try to figure out some inroads into our public universities. I don't necessarily think in 2022 they do a good job of portraying the criminal justice system in a manner that it's still a worthy profession to get into. It's clear they don't teach probation work, and so it's really going to be incumbent on us to, really be the ones to prepare officers, new officers, to understand whether they're in the institutions or in the community or the courts, what our job is, what our role is in the system, because I don't think that we get fair consideration within the universities in terms of how they perceive the system.
Okay, and I'll capitalize on that. And it's what Chief Tulock said and everybody said is, what are we doing with our university students? And, I would sometimes, as Even-Krause Chief said, go into other departments besides criminal justice. But the cool part is now we have probation officers and I asked them, why do you want to be in this profession? Well, I just got to tell you, I was on juvenile probation and my officer made a difference in my life. That is really cool. And those people, and now I'm seeing, so I also am one of those people that lectures at the university. And a lot of my students want to be probation officers, but they want to be juvenile probation officers. So for the first time, I'm hearing more and more people want to be probation officers. And I said, do you know what probation does? And let me tell you about the cool. So I think it's incumbent, we're missing that piece of getting out to schools, but we need to start in like high schools, middle schools. My team, which is phenomenal, is adopting a third grade and fourth grade classroom in a lower socioeconomic school and helping the kids read. And we come in not as, we come in as probation officers, but we make a difference in their lives starting then, and they start to know what probation is. They start not to be fearful of that. And we need to do those things and get those things out there so that people understand that probation isn't just the people that come and take away dad or mom, right? That we started that young age to make a difference. And I think we're starting to see the fruits of some of that in some of our departments.
What a great idea. I appreciate you sharing that. I bet there are pens and pencils writing that idea down.
That's one of those ideas I would bring back to my staff and they would say, she's been at CPOC again.
Exactly. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Chief Miracle, I think you were also going to jump in here.
About another challenge I see is, making sure that we keep up with the rising professional standards. And like I said, I started in 1997 and I think about what our standards were then and what they are now. So like with evidence-based practices, that wasn't even on our radar. And now we're expected to be experts. Our case plans were all related to terms and conditions. And now we address top criminogenic needs. Trauma-informed care, we have people with empathy, but now we're supposed to understand trauma and how it manifests itself. And when I first started training, it was like, here's your keys and cuffs and the unit's down there. Now it's high quality, it's meaningful, and it's continuous. And so I think as chiefs, it's our job to make sure that we're really looking forward, that where are the standards going? And we have to make sure it's our obligation to provide to our staff the training and the equipment and remove the barriers, because we ask them to do a really hard job. So we have to make sure that we're giving them everything and every opportunity they can to be successful. And as chief, I just want to say thank you to my staff, how much I appreciate them, because I look at where we've come from and where we're going, and it's all because of them and all the hard work that they do.
Another great point, and also I know one that all of you share, because we spend a significant amount of time talking about training at our table and how that really is important, and sometimes I'm sure seems burdensome on staff at times. So but that's another way to answer some of the questions that were coming in earlier too, about like, how do we stay relevant? How do we make sure that, we're in the right place and the pendulum isn't going to swing us right out of a job, right? That's really what's at the heart of the question. Well, one of the ways is to continue to get access to the training, be willing to, do those things and hold those standards high so that it allows us to make those discussions relevant and real in our communities. Anyone else on that one? Otherwise, I'll go to another question. So since you want to recruit some officers here, if you were going to go back in time, what is the one piece of advice that you would give your younger self starting out as a probation officer?
I have one.
Yeah.
I know what has made a big difference for me is finding like-minded peers and coworkers that are really thinking about next steps in the future, and kind of partnering with them and developing a professional alliance with them where, we're looking out for each other and looking out for opportunities for each other, looking for leadership opportunities, and really investing in each other and helping each other to move forward. So I learned that, later on, and I know that was instrumental in me being viable for this position. So my younger self, I would have said network more and collaborate more with others.
Great piece of advice. Any others?
Well, I would have told myself, have patience, because it's easy to want to have somebody that you've been given responsibility for the case to want to change just because you say you need to change. And we all know as human beings, it's very difficult for us to change. And so you have to have patience. Everybody comes in a different place of change, just like we all do. And so it's patience and perseverance. And just reminding myself, remember why you're doing this.
So for me, I would say I would remind myself that self-care is important and not to, the work's still going to be there in the morning. I don't need to be at my desk until 8:30, 9 o'clock. I've got small children that aren't going to be small forever because now I'm a grandparent and I'm taking that advice now, right? I'm like, my grandbaby's not going to be small forever. So, and my son is, plays high school ball and I refuse to miss his games. But those are things, right? When I was kind of a hungry, promoting and just really involved in all the initiatives and all the efforts and, wanted to be at all the graduations and all the programs and that, you kind of have to slow down a little. It's going to be okay. The work's still going to be there tomorrow.
This is all very good advice. Chief Yarber.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So getting even further upstream, I think to Chief Hanson's point about recruiting, in kindergarten, which I'm all for. I think it's important, particularly when we have those young people that express an interest, like I would tell myself, like, think about that internship, think about that opportunity, this thing that you maybe you're interested in, but just maybe you're lukewarm about, like, explore that. Because you never know where that ultimately will take itself. And then, as a young officer, and we do this quite a bit in our department. And by the way, I've got just the best staff in the land. I'm very, very fortunate at all levels to have just incredible staff. We move people around, quite a bit, and to the point where it sometimes makes our partners a little upset when, oh, the person that you just made it to the second date with, yeah, you're no longer going to see them. You're going to get someone else. And so the message there, though, which I think is a message I got in my career, at a certain point, was challenge yourself. Don't always go to that thing that oh, I'm good in the field. Field's what I love. I want another field assignment. Like, think about court. Think about, your presence there. Think about writing reports. Think about, a treatment program, because those things that force us to be uncomfortable, which is really where the learning occurs. And if you're truly trying to progress, particularly in this field, like, the more that you know about the variety of tasks and things and operations that we are involved in, the better set you will be and the more value you will give to not just our clientele, but also to the system partners. So, challenge yourself and make yourself uncomfortable.
I don't know if I want to leave the webinar on make yourself uncomfortable. I don't know. I'm picturing grabbing onto the pendulum and making sure it doesn't swing, taking a big bite of meatloaf, and yeah, that mixed together probably is going to make me feel a little uncomfortable at the end of the day. But that's a really important pushing oneself to see the new things, obviously, is the important message there. Sorry, it's late in the day. I'm getting a little punchy, people. That's where we're getting to. It must be time to bring this to a close. And I do really want to thank not just the panelists here for spending this much time and letting me torture them up before this, and as well as today. I want to thank everybody for listening in and sending in some of the questions. I really thought these were very particularly thought-provoking questions, which kind of helped us move this conversation deeper and further. So that's exactly what we were hoping to accomplish. And just one more plug, if you want to hear more things along these lines and take a little bit deeper dive on this topic or others, please feel free to check out our website at cpoc.org. There's a lot of information on there, as well as a way to connect to the podcast. So with that, I want to wish everybody a happy Friday, and thank you again for your time, and we will see you next time.